The sign at the entrance of Hartwell Vineyard read Private Event Harmon Wedding Rehearsal Dinner. I had driven 2.5 hours through the Virginia mountains to be here. My daughter Sophie had fallen asleep in the back seat somewhere around mile marker 84, her head tilted against the window, her little mouth slightly open. She was 7, and she had spent the entire week making a card for her uncle's rehearsal dinner out of pink construction paper and glitter glue. It was tucked carefully in the tote bag beside her, sealed in a Ziploc so the glitter wouldn't smear. I had barely stepped onto the gravel path when my sister-in-law walked out of the main hall. Not my brother's new wife? Not yet. Cassandra, the woman who was about to become my sister-in-law in 22 hours, stepped through the carved wooden doors like she had been waiting for me. Her dress was white. Of course it was white. "Oh, Lauren." She said my name the way you say the name of someone who forgot to read a memo. Flat. Vaguely inconvenient. I was actually going to call you. I stopped walking. The gravel crunched under my heels. The vineyard smelled like cedar and October cold, and somewhere inside I could hear the low hum of conversation and the clink of wine glasses and my brother's laugh carrying through the walls. "Call me," I repeated. "Why?" She looked at me the way people look when they've rehearsed what they're about to say but are still deciding how much they mean it. We had to make some last-minute adjustments to the seating. The venue has a really strict head count for the rehearsal dinner, and with the catering minimums and the fire code, it's complicated. I'm so sorry. I should have reached out sooner. I looked at her. I looked at the door behind her. I looked at the warm amber light spilling out through the windows. "My brother invited me," I said. "I know. And he feels terrible. He does. But Daniel just deferred to me on the logistics, and honestly, it slipped through the cracks until today." Sophie had woken up. I heard the car door open behind me, heard the soft crunch of her little sneakers on the gravel. She came and stood beside me, rubbing one eye with her fist, her card clutched in her other hand. "Are we here?" she asked. I didn't answer right away. Cassandra looked at Sophie the way adults look at children when they are mildly inconvenient props in a scene they didn't plan for. "It's just the rehearsal dinner, sweetheart," she said, in the high, sing-song voice people use when they are speaking to a child but want the parent to hear it. "The wedding tomorrow is the fun part anyway." Sophie looked up at me. "Are we going inside?" "No, baby," I said. "We're not." Cassandra's shoulders relaxed almost imperceptibly. "I'm so sorry, Lauren. I really am. There will be a seat for both of you tomorrow. I promise. This is just a dinner. Just a dinner. Just a rehearsal. Just a head count. Just a fire code. My brother had called me 3 weeks ago specifically to tell me to come early, to make a weekend of it, to bring Sophie because she was the flower girl and needed to walk the aisle at the rehearsal. He had texted me the address. He had sent a voice memo that said, "Don't be late. We're doing the whole thing." I looked at Cassandra one more time. She held my gaze with the quiet confidence of someone who had already won and knew it. "Okay," I said. I turned around. I took Sophie's hand. I walked back to the car. She didn't ask questions until we were buckled in and I was pulling back out onto the mountain road. The vineyard disappeared in the rearview mirror, the warm lights shrinking until they were just a soft glow behind the tree line. "Uncle Daniel didn't want us there?" she asked. "It's complicated," I said. "Did I do something wrong?" "No," I said, and my voice was steadier than I expected. "You did nothing wrong. You never did anything wrong. But we drove so far." "I know. My card got glitter on my pants." "I see that." She looked out the window. We drove in silence for a few minutes. Then, very quietly, she said, "Does Uncle Daniel know we came?" That one I couldn't answer, because I didn't know. And the not knowing was somehow the worst part of all of it. I had grown up in the shadow of my brother's shine. Daniel was 4 years younger than me and had always been the one my parents aimed their best intentions at the private school tuition, while I took out loans, the car at 16, while I saved up for a bus pass, the business seed money that funded 2 ventures that went nowhere, while I built my own accounting practice from a single client and a folding table in my apartment. I had never once asked to be treated equally. I had just kept moving forward, kept building, kept showing up with a smile and expensive wine at every family dinner, telling myself that one day, the scales would balance. What I had not allowed myself to see, not fully, not until that gravel crunched under my heels at Hartwell Vineyard, was that the scales were never going to balance, because someone had their thumb on them. I was about 15 minutes down the mountain road when my phone rang through the car speakers. Aunt Ruth, my father's older sister. She was 71 years old, 5'2", and had the energy of someone who had survived 2 recessions and 1 ex-husband and came out of both experiences with better posture. She had driven up from Roanoke for the weekend, and was staying at the inn a few miles from the vineyard. I had told her I was on my way when I'd stopped for gas an hour ago. I hit answer. "Where are you?" Her voice was sharp, not cold sharp. The difference mattered with Aunt Ruth. "On my way back to the inn." Cassandra turned us away at the door. Headcount issue, apparently. The silence that followed was the kind that has weight to it. You can feel it pressing through the phone. "Pull over," she said. "Aunt Ruth, I'm fine. I just want to get Sophie settled and—" "Lauren Marie, pull the car over." I pulled over. Sophie looked at me with wide eyes. "Now you listen to me," Aunt Ruth said, and her voice had dropped to something I had never heard directed at me before. It was low and deliberate, and utterly certain. "You turn that car around, right now. You come back to that vineyard, and you wait in the parking lot, and you do not leave. Do you understand me? What's happening? I'll explain when you get here. But I need you here. This is not about a head count." My hands were on the wheel. The engine was idling. Sophie was watching me with the particular attention children give to moments they can sense are important, even when they don't understand why. "Aunt Ruth," I said, "I don't want to drag Sophie back into something that's just going—" "This is not just something," she said. "I have been sitting at this dinner for 40 minutes, and I have been watching your brother's face every time the door opens. He didn't know you weren't coming. Lauren. He did not know." I sat with that for a moment. "Turn around," she said again, but this time it was softer. "Trust me." I turned the car around. The drive back felt longer than the drive away. Sophie had stopped asking questions. She was looking at her card in her lap, smoothing the cover with one thumb. I kept both hands on the wheel and kept my eyes on the road and told myself that whatever happened in the next hour, I was going to stay calm. I was going to be the version of myself that my daughter could be proud of. We pulled back into the vineyard parking lot. Aunt Ruth was already outside, standing under the wood-beamed entrance with her arms crossed and her reading glasses pushed up into her silver hair. When she saw my car, she walked toward me with the purposeful stride of someone who had made a decision and was not reconsidering it. I got out. Sophie climbed out after me, still holding her card. Aunt Ruth looked at Sophie first. She bent down slightly. "Hello, my love. Are you tired?" "I slept in the car," Sophie said. "Good girl." She straightened up and looked at me. Her expression was not angry. It was something closer to the face people make just before they open a window in a room that has been sealed too long. "Your grandmother's jewelry box," she said. I blinked. "What?" "Your father's mother's jewelry box, the one with the pearl clasp on the front. You know the one I mean?" I knew the one she meant. It was a dark mahogany box, roughly the size of a shoebox, lined in ivory silk. It had sat on the dresser in my grandmother's bedroom my entire childhood. When my grandmother passed, she had left it specifically to my father in her will not to be divided, not to be sold, just held. It had been in my father's study ever since. I had polished it once as a teenager. It contained a strand of Mikimoto pearls, a sapphire cocktail ring from the 1960s, and a pair of diamond earrings my grandfather had given my grandmother on their 30th anniversary. Conservative estimate, $60,000. Sentimental value, incalculable. "What about it?" I said. "Cassandra is wearing the sapphire ring," Aunt Ruth said. "Right now, at the table, on her right hand." I stared at her. I noticed it when she poured the wine. "I've seen that ring every Christmas for 40 years. I know every facet of that stone." She paused. "I went to your father at the table and I asked him if he had given it to Daniel as an engagement gift. He went white as a sheet. He didn't know it was missing." My mind was moving quickly, assembling pieces I hadn't known I was collecting. The jewelry box, the ring. Cassandra at the door, so careful and so practiced in her reason for turning me away. The way she had not quite met my eyes when she said it slipped through the cracks. I had spent every Christmas at my parents' house helping my mother dust the study. I knew that box. I knew its contents the way you know the furniture in a room you've fallen asleep in 100 times. If I had walked into that rehearsal dinner and seen Cassandra wearing my grandmother's sapphire ring, I would have known. Immediately, without question. I was not turned away because of a head count. I was turned away because I was the only person in that building who would have noticed. "Where's my brother?" I asked. "At the table. He thinks you couldn't make it, that something came up with the drive." She paused. "Cassandra told him you called her this afternoon." I had not called her this afternoon. I had not spoken to Cassandra in 2 weeks. I looked at the vineyard entrance. Through the tall windows, I could see the glow of candles on the tables and the shapes of my family moving inside my father, my mother, Daniel, his groomsmen, the whole warm tableau of people celebrating something I had been carefully cut out of. Aunt Ruth put her hand on my arm. I have already spoken to the venue manager. We are going in. She led us through the doors. The room was large and warm, with exposed stone walls and long oak tables set with white linens and small arrangements of fall flowers. There were maybe 40 people, and the conversation was easy and well-fed and glittering the way conversations get when the wine has been open for an hour. My entrance did not stop the room, but it stopped one person. Cassandra saw me before Daniel did. She was seated at the center of the main table, mid-laugh, her right hand resting on the white linen where the sapphire ring caught the candlelight. The moment her eyes found mine across the room, the laugh stopped. The hand moved. She pulled it below the table in one smooth, practiced gesture, but not before I had already confirmed what Aunt Ruth had told me. It was my grandmother's ring. I would have known it anywhere. Daniel looked up a second later. His face moved through surprise, relief, and then something uncertain, some flicker of confusion about why my expression was the way it was. Lauren! He stood up, started toward me. I thought Cassandra said you called, that you weren't going to make it. I'm here, I said. I made it. He looked at me, then at Aunt Ruth, then back at me. He had known me for 30 years. He knew what my face looked like when something was wrong. Aunt Ruth stepped forward before I could speak. She moved to the center of the room with the unhurried certainty of a woman who had raised her voice in harder rooms than this, and she spoke at a volume that reached every table without quite being a shout. Forgive me for interrupting, she said. But before this family celebrates tomorrow, there's something that needs to be addressed tonight. The room went quiet, the way rooms go quiet when a person of a certain age and a certain bearing decides something is going to be said. My father was looking at Aunt Ruth with the expression of a man who already suspects what is coming and is not sure whether to be grateful or terrified. Aunt Ruth turned and looked at Cassandra directly. Cassandra, would you put your right hand on the table, please? The room held. Cassandra did not move for a moment. Her face was perfectly composed, the kind of composure that takes effort to hold. Then she smiled, the practiced smile of someone accustomed to managing impressions, and she placed her right hand on the table. The sapphire ring was no longer on it. She removed it, Sophie whispered, from somewhere behind my leg, out of the mouth of a 7-year-old. Several people at the nearest table heard it. A few heads turned. Aunt Ruth reached into her cardigan pocket and placed a photograph on the table in front of Cassandra. It was a printed snapshot. I recognized it as one from my parents' Christmas album, probably 2019 or 2020, showing the open jewelry box on my grandmother's dresser. The ring was clearly visible, sitting in its ivory silk slot, the sapphire catching the light. This ring has been in this family for 63 years, Aunt Ruth said, to the room now, not just to Cassandra. It was never offered as an engagement gift. It was not given to Daniel. Your father, she looked at me, had no knowledge it was missing. My father stood up slowly from his chair. His face had gone through several colors and had settled on something pale and rigid. Where is it? He asked. Cassandra looked at my brother. It was the look of someone recalculating rapidly, deciding which version of the next sentence gives them the best outcome. Daniel gave it to me, she said. Her voice was steady, impressively steady. He said he had clearance from the family. He said it was going to be a surprise. Every head in the room turned toward my brother. Daniel looked at Cassandra. Something moved behind his eyes, not anger yet, just the slow, disorienting recognition of a man who is realizing the floor he's been standing on is not what he thought it was. I never said that, he said. The steadiness cracked. It cracked quietly, no dramatic collapse, just a visible fracture at the corners of her mouth. She looked at him and he looked at her and the room watched them both. And in that silence, everything that needed to be understood was understood. Daniel, my father said. And his voice was the voice of a man who has spent years in the gracious habit of looking away from things and has just run out of room to keep doing it. Did you take that ring? No, Daniel said. He was still looking at Cassandra. I didn't even know it was gone. It's in her bag, said one of the groomsmen, very quietly, from the other end of the table. He had the look of someone who had been uncomfortable for longer than tonight. I saw her put something in her clutch before dinner. Cassandra picked up her clutch from the back of her chair and stood up. I don't have to sit here and be accused of... Cassandra. My father's voice was not loud, but it landed. Put the bag on the table. She didn't move. That ring belonged to my mother, he said. I would like it back. The silence in the room had changed quality. It was no longer the silence of a gathering paused. It was the silence of people who have witnessed something they will be describing for years. The wedding guests, the family friends, the groomsmen who had known Daniel since college, they were all very still and very watchful. Cassandra set the clutch on the table. My father opened it. He reached inside. He placed the sapphire ring on the linen beside Aunt Ruth's photograph, and he looked at it for a long moment the way you look at something you thought you'd never see again. Then he looked at Cassandra. "I think you should go," he said. "This is my rehearsal dinner," she said. "Yes," he said. It was. My brother had not sat back down. He was still standing at his place at the table, very straight, very still, like a man waiting for the room to stop tilting. I knew that feeling. I had felt it myself, 3 months ago, 6 months ago, every Christmas for the last 5 years. The feeling of the thing you had built your assumptions around turning out to be hollow. I walked to him. "I'm sorry," he said, to me. "I know. I didn't know she turned you away. I didn't know about the ring. I know that too." He looked at me. He had his father's eyes and our grandmother's stubborn jaw, and he looked, right then, like the kid brother I had driven to soccer practice for 3 years, not the man I had been quietly resenting for half a decade. "She told me you called this afternoon," he said, "to say you weren't coming." "I know," I said again. "I didn't call." He closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, Cassandra was collecting her things from her chair with the controlled movements of someone who has not yet decided whether to walk out or fight, and the room was still watching her make that calculation. She walked out. The door closed behind her. The sound of it was very final. My father was still standing at the table, the ring in his hand. He looked across the room at me. He looked at Sophie, who had materialized beside me at some point and was leaning quietly against my arm, her construction paper card still in her hands. "Come sit down, sweetheart," he said, to Sophie. "Come sit next to Grandpa." Sophie looked up at me. "Go ahead," I said. She walked to her grandfather, and he pulled out the chair beside him, and she climbed into it with the unself-conscious ease of a child who does not yet know how rare it is to feel wanted in a room. She placed her card on the table in front of her, smoothed it once, and then picked up a bread roll. Aunt Ruth put her arm around my shoulders for a moment, brief, firm, warm. "Sit," she said. "We have dinner to eat." I sat. The conversation did not return to normal immediately. It moved carefully at first, the way conversation moves after something has been cleared out of the air, a little tentative, a little raw at the edges, but with the particular quality of air that has finally been let in. Gradually, it found its footing. The wine was poured. The first course was served. My brother sat across from me and we talked about nothing important for 20 minutes, and it was the easiest conversation we'd had in years. Daniel called off the wedding the next morning. Not because Aunt Ruth asked him to, not because my father told him to. He called it off himself, at 7:30 in the morning, in a phone call I was not part of, but that he told me about afterward. He said he had spent the night going back through the last 8 months, the small inconsistencies he had smoothed over, the things Cassandra had told him that had turned out not to be quite true, the friends she had gradually made inconvenient for him to see. The ring was not the only thing she had taken, but it was the thing that clarified the rest. There were no guests to notify yet, just immediate family, just the rehearsal party. The venue was understanding. The inn where we were all staying had a breakfast spread and enormous windows overlooking the mountains, and we ate eggs and drank coffee and let the morning be quiet around us. My father placed the sapphire ring back in my grandmother's jewelry box that afternoon, in his study, in the exact spot where it had always sat. He left the box open for a little while. I stood in the doorway and watched him look at it, and I thought about all the Christmases I had come home and polished that box without being asked, because I knew no one else would. A year later, my family had a Thanksgiving that looked nothing like the ones I had grown up dreading. Sophie sat at my father's right hand and told him at length about her second-grade teacher, who apparently had a guinea pig named Theorem, and my father listened to every word of it with the focused attention of a man who has recently recalibrated what he considers worth paying attention to. My brother was there, and he had recently started seeing someone new, a woman he had introduced to the family at Easter, with a quietness and a care I had not seen from him before. Aunt Ruth had driven up from Roanoke again and was holding court at the other end of the table, telling the story of her second honeymoon, which had involved a rental car, a misread map, and a sheep farm in rural Ireland, and which got better every time she told it. I sat in a chair that felt, for the first time in my memory, unambiguously mine. There was no performance required, no smile calibrated to the right wattage, no careful navigation of who was in favor this week and who had fallen out of it. I was not the backup, the also-ran, the daughter who had funded her own life without acknowledgement while watching someone else receive the standing ovation. I was just a person at a table she belonged at, eating sweet potato casserole and watching her daughter make her grandfather laugh. After dinner, while Sophie was helping clear plates and my brother was washing dishes and my father was opening a second bottle of wine, I stepped out onto the back porch for a few minutes. The night air was cold the way November is cold in Virginia, clean and direct, not cruel. The stars were very clear. I thought about Hartwell Vineyard, the gravel crunching under my heels. Cassandra at the door, so certain, so practiced, so sure that I would absorb the redirection and disappear back down the mountain. I thought about Sophie asking, in the dark car, if she had done something wrong. I thought about how many times I had asked myself that same question. How many years I had turned it over, looking for the answer in my own behavior, what I could change, what I could do better, how I could make myself less inconvenient to the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. The door I had stood in front of that night had not been closed because of who I was. It had been closed because of what I could see, because I was the person in that room who would have looked at Cassandra's hand and known immediately what was on it. Because my attention, my memory, my integrity was not a problem to be managed, but a threat to be neutralized. And the moment I understood that truly understood it, not just as a thought, but as a fact settled in my bones, was the moment I stopped carrying it. The porch light was warm behind me. Through the window, I could see the kitchen, Sophie on her tiptoes trying to reach a shelf. My brother intercepting her, lifting her to reach it, both of them laughing. I want to say something to you. If you're listening to this right now, if you are the person in your family who sees things clearly, if you are the one who pays attention, who remembers, who notices what other people overlook or prefer not to look at, that is not a flaw. That is not the reason you've been made to feel unwelcome. You are not too much. You are not difficult. You are not the problem. You are the person they needed to move out of the room before they could do what they were planning. And when you finally understand that, it changes everything. Not because the people who hurt you suddenly become better people, but because you stop organizing your worth around their willingness to acknowledge it. You stop standing on the porch and waiting for the door to open. You turn around, you go back to your car, you sit in the quiet for a moment. And then, when someone who actually loves you calls and tells you to come back, you do. Because some doors are worth walking back through. The ones on the other side of which are the people who, when it mattered, told the truth. I went back inside. The kitchen smelled like cinnamon and roasting turkey and dish soap. And Sophie was showing Aunt Ruth her card from last year. She had kept it, brought it, presented it to her great-aunt with the solemn pride of an artist sharing her portfolio. Aunt Ruth was studying it with the gravity it deserved. The glitter, Aunt Ruth said approvingly, is exceptional. I used a lot, Sophie confirmed. I pulled the kitchen door closed behind me, and the cold stayed outside where it belonged. And I stayed in, with the warmth and the noise, and the people who had earned their place at my table just as I had earned mine at theirs. The night stretched out ahead of us, unhurried and whole. Before you go, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from tonight. I read every single one, and I never get tired of seeing how wide this community reaches. And if this story found you at a moment when you needed to hear it, share it with someone else who might need it too. See you in the next one.